Hi, I'm Laura, and today I really wanted to discuss about the costs of building a custom home. So if you've ever considered building one or you are thinking about building one, a lot of times you have a budget in mind of like what you want to spend on your house. So for today's illustration, we are going to just use $1 million price point for the house, which is not really very much. It's actually hard to build a pretty nice home for anything less than $1 million, but it's just a nice, easy number to use for the math of it. So you want to build a house, and what usually people focus on is how much is the cost of the house itself, the construction costs. Okay, so $1 million house is what you're budgeting for. And for today's illustration, I am using Starburst. So each of these Starburst is worth $10,000. Okay, so we have $1 million worth of Starburst as the construction costs. However, there are other additional costs that are involved in building your house and furnishing it. So one of them is the furnishings. The furnishings, this is everything from furniture, rugs, tables, lamps, art, window treatments, everything that goes in, because this is just building you the shell. And that's just part of the story, important part of the story, but it's just part of the story. And so to have the whole interior done, you have to also do to furnish it. And then we're going to talk about the bucket of your design team. Okay, so if you are bringing in furnishings from your current house, this math is not going to work exactly because you are offsetting the cost of buying new furniture by what you're bringing. But let's just say you want a whole new house, a whole new look, you just want to buy everything. So this has been sort of just a really rough rule of thumb that my entire career it's been around for my entire career. I think it's just and it actually turns out to be true, because when we track the numbers, it's kind of true that basically 1/3 of the cost of your construction is going into your home furnishings. Okay, that freaks a lot of people out. But if you think about it, to replace everything in your home, which you have just, probably done it by accumulating over the years, if you had to replace everything, it would be a significant number. It would probably come out to be about the same. So you're doing $1 million house, that's basically $300,000 for furnishing, maybe even 33. General is a third, but let me screw the base. So here you go. Here's your 30 pieces of Starburst to furnish this $1 million house. Now, I have seen, and you have seen, like if you ever checked out a real estate show or anything, and you want to see that what that $10 million house really looks like inside. Sometimes it's really beautifully furnished, and sometimes I can't believe it. Sometimes you just see, oh my goodness, they have the matching brown leather couch, the brown leather love seat, and the brown chair in the great room in this $10 million house in this beautiful place. And maybe you don't kind of like gag, but we interior design are like, what? We're hoping that it's just been staged by the realtor. So, but generally, the caliber of the home is generally what the homeowners want to keep as the caliber of the interior, but not always, because you all have to decide where your priorities. Are you wanting this beautiful functional house, and you want to make sure it's built well to maintain your investment, but the reality is you really don't need it to look like something out of a magazine. You just want your family to be healthy, happy, and to be able to do what they need to do. So, but generally we are trying to keep up with this. I've had clients that will try to not do this, but really it's really hard not to even just like hit 25%. It really is. So there's a significant value of that. And so you want to make sure when you're calculating your cost of construction that you also are aware that you need a sizable amount of money to furnish it, or you won't be done. Now, I do have had clients where they have to build this house because they're growing a family and they have to have so many bedrooms and so many bathrooms, and they know going in that they're going to be short. And they're just going to fill it with what they have or a few purchases to get through knowing that they're going to have to build up their cash flow for a few years to start filling in the gaps. But if you are looking for building a home and having at the end of it, quickly on the heels of construction, where it is finished, where it is beautiful and it's finished, this really needs to be a consideration. And if you don't get these numbers right, we're going to talk about that here in a second. What happens is in construction, because there's always seems like there's always something, even when you plan well, there's still usually some extra costs involved. And so what happens is if there's not additional financial resources, if you really are, you've got to hold the number, but you've figured out how much a house, you've allotted a budget for the home furnishings, but this starts creeping up for different reasons. See? Money starts getting out of this pile and starts going into this pile. So it takes good planning, which leads us to bucket number 3, your design team. So if you are building a new home, you need a set of architectural plans. And there's a couple ways that that can be achieved. If you are building with a design build, there's still a cost to it, but depending on the level of construction where that goes. So architects, okay, first of all, in most states, and in Ohio where I live, you do not need to be a licensed architect to design a residential home. Actually, this kind of surprises people at times. And so a lot of people will use, basically it's a draftsman who specializes in home plans. A lot of builders use draftsmen because they're much more reasonable, or if they're a higher level build, they will hire an architect and or actually maybe have even an in-house architect. And I have to tell you, from the set of plans, the construction plans that come across my table, my desk, and I get plans from both the draftsmen and from architects, there is a difference. There really is a difference. And so with architecture, if you are just doing sort of a home draftsman or working with a builder or whatever, that architectural fee may be pretty darn reasonable. It may be only, I don't know, might even be only 10%. 1%, $10,000, maybe even less. We're only talking about $1 million house. And here's the thing, at $1 million now, at this point, you are most likely not hiring a high-end architect because your house is actually too small for them to be involved. But if you were to go for a larger scale house, like say you're going to build a 5,000 square foot house, 7,000 square foot, 10,000 square foot, the higher you go, the higher the caliber of the architect that you will probably need. And there is a difference between basic preliminary or basic plans. Like it doesn't take a lot for at a lower level of construction. You won't need necessarily the full window schedule or all this. You'll need the plan. You'll need some elevations. You'll need the site plan. Obviously the floor plans. You'll need some sort of reflected electrical plan. You'll need some basics. Those in themselves are not necessarily very expensive to achieve, but if you get an architect who is now doing, like, it's large, lot of details. They're calling out the interior door schedule. They're calling out the whole window schedule. They are actually doing interior elevations, which I don't see very often. That usually falls now into the category of the interior designer who's actually doing the more detailed millwork and fireplace design. And that's where I'm getting is to the interior design part of it is the fact that the architect and the interior designer will have skill sets that overlap. So there have been architects that want to get into the weeds of all the details of the interior. Frank Lloyd Wright kind of hits my brain on that one. But I have to say that most of the architectural, even the ones from the architects with full construction, they're not putting that kind of detailing in. That's mostly falling into the hands of the interior designer. So you need some sort of architectural design team. It might only be, say, 10,000. Maybe it's 10%. It's not uncommon for a higher end architect of the construction costs. So, but we're still at the $1 million. So I'll just give $20,000, right? $20,000. That's a lot for $1 million house. Or at least a preliminary. So there you have your architectural. Now the thing is, how much is that interior designer going to cost? Because I was just mentioning, Those are where the fireplace design, the millwork design, the architect has laid out the kitchen in general, but it often is subject to change from when the interior designer starts working, or if you don't have an interior designer, that's when the homeowner starts getting into the weeds of with the cabinet supplier or whatever, or if there is a design build, but somebody's doing the work. So let's say this is just custom and you've hired an interior designer. Interior designers, huge range of price points. I would say, and it depends on the price of the level of the home. So for example, you could use a rough number about 10. We don't generally charge percentage of construction, but we track it, and I can just tell you this is where it's kind of landing. Is if it's a smaller house, like $1 million, for me up in Cleveland, it's probably running 7 to 8%. Remodeling costs more, by the way. In both you can't do a square foot thing there. But generally it's more about scope, how much time and effort and detail we need to go put into. But for today's conversation, I'm going to say 8% of $1 million house, which is about $80,000. So there's my start. So here's your design team. And so the question is, okay, well, you'd have to have that. Nobody's going to you might have to say, well, we got to get that $1 million. We may have to reselect some things or whatever, but here's your construction cost. Talked about the home furnishing cost. Well, pay attention to it. It's there, whether you want to put that money in there or not, but you start adding everything up. People are just totally surprised. You know what I usually tell them? First thing to look when they start looking at me like I'm nuts is you're going to buy a dining room set. Okay. You want some chairs. See, the table is not the big thing. Table, a couple grand, maybe 3 or 4, I can get that really beautiful walnut table for $3,000 or something. I go, how many chairs do you want? And then they say, well, I think I need 8 chairs. Okay. Average, not high end, just like average is at least $800 a chair. So let's say $1,000 per chair. So you get $8,000 just in your dining room chairs. You can see, you start adding it up, and we start adding up the artwork and the lamps and everything. It just, it gets there. It really does. And so it does take some attention. So you say, okay, we get that. We're going to have to go shopping for furnishings, and that's going to be part of the whole design process. And so you go, oh, but you know what? Well, we need the architect draftsman. Somebody's got to make the plans. But, maybe we don't need the interior design help. Maybe we can just do this on our own. I'm not going to put these starbursts back in the bucket because they're legitimately still the cost of involved in the cost of your house. Somebody still has to do all your selections. I mean, you're talking lock sets, casing, baseboards, all your lighting fixtures, your fans, your kitchen design, your bathroom design, your tile, your hardwood flooring, your carpets, and if you're doing full scale, and when I gave you those numbers, I'm talking about somebody who's also figuring out what these are going to be, not just these. So if you hire an interior designer to just pick out the selections for the builder, those are builder designer selections. If you're going a full scale designer, they are doing this and they're also doing this. Okay, so you're saying, okay, maybe I don't need to pay the interior designer. And thousands, millions of homes are built without an interior designer, but the value is still here, and this is why. I want to use a little story of, so I follow a Scottsdale, Arizona builder named Brad Levitt. And I fell in love with him when he's talked about this story years ago. He does a high-end build out there in Arizona. And one of the homeowners building a home said to him, well, I don't want to hire an interior designer. I'll just work with you. And he looked at him and said, oh, it's going to be $75,000 more. And the homeowner just looks at him and is surprised. It's because Brad said, that's how much it's going to cost me in holding your hand to go through this process, the delays of my construction process, and whatever. And the bottom line is somebody still has to do the work. Now, it can be you, the homeowner, but then what this does is, okay, this value is your time. This is so it's still investment. It may not be from your checkbook, but it's an investment on your time. It's also many times, in fact, a number of interior designers I've listened to a podcast, this is how they got started. They were doing their own home. They loved it. And they'll tell you, it was the trades and the builder that held their hand to get them through, is how they learned. I think there was a lot of bringing donuts to the construction site through that, as they were learning. but somebody has to do the work. So the value is there. So do you have the time and the inclination, or put your money into that process? Somebody's got to do it. And truthfully, yes, a lot of the builders, they even supply what they call design services. It's mostly just this selection process because they just want to build it for you. But if you want a home that is going to be ultimately completely done from the bones to the artwork on the walls, somebody still has to do all of that. So today I don't want to get into the differences of the pros and cons of design build versus design bid build, or getting too much into the pros and cons of hiring an interior designer in this. My objective today is just to have you clearly focus on that it's not just about this pile of investment. It's about these all working together, and something, so you really need to clearly think about that. And it's really important, of course, like I was saying, that you do enough of this to know truly what this is. And that's the other thing, is what this process is of doing that legwork and doing all that design selection and everything. Ultimately, the actual price of the home can't be determined until this is done. So you're going to do it, somebody else is going to do it, somebody's going to do it. So just pay attention before you get yourself locked in under construction and the money's flying out and you don't understand why it's going out the way it is. Okay, hope that helps. We'll pick up another conversation in the future. I know I got to address that whole design build versus design build conversation, and also what it is. Oh, I forgot a couple starbursts. That the reason why, if you don't have the time, that somebody like myself could really help you. All right, last thing is, if you're wondering why pink starburst, I'm a youth leader, and the kids love the pink ones. They're always picking out the pink ones. And so by using these as an illustration, and I go next time to the youth group meeting, I will take buckets of pink starburst back to them and they will be thrilled. All right, thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.